So the real world value really comes in the trustlessness and the transparency. And those seem very simple things, but when you look at most of the technologies or financial services that you use, they're actually pretty opaque.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
We are live from Laguna Beach, California at the Ben Reinberg I Own It studio today and have a really fascinating guest I know that you're going to appreciate and enjoy. Robby Greenfield, welcome to the show. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for traveling to be in studio. I love in-studio guests. It's one of my favorite things. And let's kick things off, okay? Can you share a high-level summary of what Web3 is? And how is your company, Umoja Labs, can be helpful to people?
Yeah, absolutely. One, greatly appreciate your time and being on the show. And two, for Web3, it's effectively making peer-to-peer every service technology that you can think of. And one example that I like to use instead of going straight into the technology is that imagine you have a group chat, like you have your phone, I have my phone, we're part of the same group chat, and everything that we do, we put in that chat, right? It's okay. I'm going to Whole Foods earlier today, or I'm writing, a book, over this month, and we keep that log, right? Now you can say and text me, I'm going to Whole Foods, Robby, and on that text it says Ben sent this at this time, right? I have it on my phone, and then later you can't say I didn't say that, right? And so that sounds very simple, but the ability for us to have consensus as to what the actual truth is, right? That peer-to-peer relationship is what Web3 is. And now apply that to every transaction that you can think of. Now you can facilitate real estate deals, right? Without having intermediaries that you would need to before, because seller and buyer don't necessarily trust each other. So it's being able to automatically execute certain transactions in a peer-to-peer nature without one person having to trust the other. That is what Web3 is. And then applying that to effectively every use case that you can think of.
So this is probably going to eliminate a lot of middlemen in different industries.
Yes, absolutely. And you're already starting to see it. I mean, particularly in the context of real estate, you're also starting to see it in stocks in terms of, real world assets and securities more generally. But you're also starting to see it in terms of remittances, right? Being able to send money from here to Tanzania without having to use Western Union, for example, and paying 15 to 20% in transaction fees. And that's going to greatly reduce the cost of just transacting more generally. Yeah.
So how does crypto technology provide real world value? And share some example of products that are just not speculative, but are creating value today.
Yeah, absolutely. So the real world value really comes in the trustlessness and the transparency. And those seem very simple things, but when you look at most of the technologies or financial services that you use, they're actually pretty opaque. A perfect example in terms of something, to that is Umoja. Some of our products help facilitate humanitarian aid with NGOs. Now, traditionally, when you're facilitating humanitarian aid, let's say in Ukraine war crisis or, tsunami hits, we give money to, say, the Red Cross or Oxfam, and we just kind of wait, right? We don't get any financial statement or expenses. You may get a quarterly impact report that says, we've distributed, $2 million and it's helped this many people, but it's very, very high level. You don't necessarily know what your dollar was spent on. And then you come to find out that 5% of the $40 billion distributed in humanitarian aid is actually lost to fraud. And you'd think that fraud is committed by the people who are receiving the aid, when a lot of the fraud is committed by the organizations that are giving it. And so blockchain technology and, some of our products, and there are others that are doing this as well. Now you can provide an NGO, like say Hope for Haiti, which is one of our partners. They can distribute that money to a Haitian on the ground that has need of food assistance. And you can literally see transactionally, my money went here, and then it was spent on rice and oranges and medical support. So you literally can see the details of your dollar and how it's spent. And that's going to increase your trust as a donor to continue giving to that organization. And so this level of hyper transparency you don't see in a lot of different industries. Another example, and this is actually, coming from some of the bad use cases of crypto. So initially when Bitcoin came out, everybody thought it was anonymous, and so people were buying all types of illicit things, drugs, etc. But what they didn't realize is that there is a trail of where that money is going. And so the FBI for the Silk Road, for example, actually used those trails to identify, oh, this person's pulling out a hit on somebody. Probably shouldn't do that. And so it can be helpful in both scenarios in terms of, opaqueness in the illicit context, but also in helping those, that need it as well.
So in my experience, I see many Web3 evangelists and who think the current system is completely broken, and others who think the future uses cases will likely be more modest and less revolutionary. Where would you describe yourself in this process?
I'm an optimist. There is definitely a lot of speculation in, Web3 and the crypto space at large, just as in any industry. And unfortunately, those stories get the most press, right? I do think that we as an industry have to do a better job at creating case studies of what is actually real, and also just developing applications that is real. I do think, though, that just as entrepreneurs and media need to highlight those use cases, and I'm going to not attack venture capitalists, but give them some accountability too, you have to put money into those use cases as well, right? Because there is very much a printing money nature of Web3 and crypto. It absolutely exists. A perfect example, many venture capital firms, if they see a project has a token, right, they see that as a liquid return on investment. So I'm going to invest in this company for equity, but really I'm going to invest to get a whole bunch of tokens and then just flip once it's listed on Coinbase. That absolutely happens. And that is poisonous, right? That when you do that too much and there's a lack of utility in, the cryptocurrency of a particular project, which all projects do not need cryptocurrency at all, it does, give regulators a thought that these things might be securities. So I do think that, those parts of, crypto need to be kind of put down, and we need to do a better job at what's actually real. And you're starting to see a lot of those use cases come to shine now that, huge entities like Coinbase and others are actually starting to lobby to make sure that there's a regulatory environment safe enough, especially in the United States, so that you actually can see that innovation. Because right now, that security scare, particularly led by the SEC, is getting so bad that we're starting to propose laws and regulations that effectively are forcing entrepreneurs elsewhere. So just like during, COVID, where we saw a lot of, Web3 entrepreneurs fly to Miami because Miami was making it a pretty good city, for building those type of things. Now you're seeing a mass exodus to places like Dubai because, from a national perspective, it's a much better environment there than it is in the United States.
Understood. So FTX and other crypto collapses has put a damper on a lot of people's excitement of Web3, at least in the near term, right? How has the recent decline in enthusiasm and valuations for Web3 changed your view on the industry, even at all?
Yeah, it's there's a duality in how I feel about this. One side, very angry. Again, there's a lack of due diligence on the VC side when it comes to things like FTX, when it comes to things like Terra Luna, which was more on the protocol side. You're starting to see these multi-billion-dollar valuations after just a few years, and in the 99% of cases of any type of business, there's something up. I've got that's kind of been my thesis in terms of like, as a personal investor, but just looking at other projects. If you reach a multi-billion-dollar valuation in an extremely short amount of time, unless you're being incredibly transparent in terms of your financial statements and your user counts, a lot of which are inflated, I'm going to think that something is up. And I think that a lot of VCs don't do enough due diligence in terms of those projects, and then it creates systemic risk exposure to the rest of the market, right? Because now you have hundreds of billions or tens of billions of dollars, of transactions that this entity is central to. The other part of me, is optimistic, because as a much smaller company than FTX was, now I'm a much bigger company than FTX is. And so, there's still time to build. There's still hope to have an impact, and obviously, different companies are focused on different things. But it shows you that if you going about things the right way and building something that's real may take longer because there's less funding and there's less sexiness around that. But in the long term, it's going to be a lot more sustainable, and you're going to get to where you want to go, and that creates a lot of hope. And so, there's two sides of that. I hope it stops happening, but I feel like the media does like to find heroes in particular industries and kind of exalt them, to a certain place to whereas, okay, everyone can look and understand, okay, this is what the industry is. Just look at this person and you'll find what you're looking for. And I think that's what they did with SBO.
Well, it's kind of like Amazon. No one thought that you would be buying goods and services over the internet. Yeah. And now all of a sudden it's one click away, and now it's common practice and everyone knows, and said, well, go look it up on Amazon and buy it. Yeah. And I think it's in that early stage that people will find it more acceptable. It's like anything in life. It's that you'll get criticized and then eventually they'll applaud you. Yeah. And it's just human nature. It's interesting. Someone said that to me. I think my friend Steve Sims said that, and it's so true. It's Elon Musk said that. That's his quote. And so for people thinking about investing in the crypto space, any guidance on how do you invest prudently? I mean, people talk about wallets. People have had crypto stolen from them with, scams and people calling them and saying, hey, setting up accounts and stuff. How would you suggest? Because there's a lot of fear. Like, I'm a novice. There's a lot of novices. I do own crypto, but I do have concern with the security. I'm like, am I going to keep pouring money into this industry? Yeah. How would you suggest people should invest?
Yeah, and I preface, this is not financial advice.
Right. This is just experience, folks. This is just he's dropping knowledge from his personal experience. He's not giving advice.
Exactly. I mean, there are parallels. I wouldn't say that they're the same in all respects, but there are parallels between stock investing and investing in tokens, because both things represent a project, represent an initiative. I think the issue is that there isn't a regulatory framework to protect consumers from real projects in crypto versus BS ones. And there are a lot of BS ones because anyone can create a token. It's 5-minute process, right? And so I think that in terms of investment strategy, you probably should stick to things that have fashioned themselves as digital commodities, meaning that they're so important and they're so used and so many other projects are built atop them that they're never going to go away. And the only things that I can consider meet those expectations are Ethereum and Ether or ETH and Bitcoin and BTC, right? I'm fearful to recommend anything beyond that because it really does take you reading the white papers, understanding the venture, backing a particular project, understanding the token distribution. There are a lot of considerations and technical analyses for any tokens that aren't those two for you to put your money in without greatly increasing your appetite for risk. Now, granted, a lot of Web3 people have very high appetite for risk, so so they'll do those things. But I can tell you that a lot of these transaction volumes and price pressure for a lot of these tokens are artificially created. And that is a huge issue, and that can leave people extremely vulnerable. So I would tell people, like, never, don't take out a second mortgage. Don't sell your car if you need it. Like, stick to traditional investments. BTC and ETH, I think, are good, especially in a time like this, because Bitcoin was created in the context of the 2008 crisis, right? In that you cannot trust banks for the same reasons of a lack of transparency that we described earlier, because you have poor asset liability mismatch strategies, and you can't see what those things are until it happens, and then everyone's making a run. And now that we have social media, people can make a run like that. You can be flush on Monday and literally have a bank run by Friday. And when you see that lack of trust that has continued since 2008, you actually see tokens like Bitcoin rally, because the fact is that you can see everything. It's hyper transparent. I mean, granted, it's extremely expensive if you want to buy a whole thing, but you can still fractionally invest. And there's a lot of utility, that it does bring, right? It introduced the technology that is blockchain to the world, even though it's more, financial and focused. And so that's what I would say on that part. Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because a lot of people are concerned and want to know about how to prudently invest. So outside of crypto, how do you manage your investment portfolio? Do you have any commercial real estate investments? What do you do?
Yeah.
And outside the Web3 and the digital asset world.
Yeah, yeah, and I again much higher risk appetite. So burned frequently, but learning, learning and burning. Um, for me, it's real estate. It's developing other applications outside of the context of blockchain technology. So obviously I'm a technologist, but I think that developing particularly any financial related technologies is very difficult because there's a lot of regulatory compliance that comes with that. And that's just a burden to what you're trying to create. When you can create something very simple like, a Tesla food delivery app or whichever, and not have any of those problems. So investing in innovation outside of the space, obviously real estate is a huge part of that. If you can buy a home, I wouldn't necessarily do that right now because interest rates are very high, but do so and generating equity, but then also understanding, and this is something that's been extremely helpful. And I know that for people who might not be financially minded, I definitely encourage you to look up these things, but understanding how the federal interest rate, the macroeconomics of the federal interest rate works. That is incredibly helpful, right? Understanding that, okay, if the federal interest rate continues to go up, right, then you might not necessarily you might want to wait to purchase, U.S. bonds, right? Because you could make a lot of money on the last one that, it's up before it goes down, or shorting them if it's going to, those type of things are very simple, but also safe investment strategies that if you just get an understanding on, going to like Investopedia, which I use a lot when I don't understand certain financial vehicles, can at least give you something, to take refuge in. Obviously exposure to BTC and ETH. I've also increasingly looked at in fractional investing, and this is happening a lot in real estate. So if you can't buy a house, there are now options where you can buy 1% of a house. And that's, all of us want to go from 0 to 100 in a day, but if you only have a few $100s, you got to start somewhere, and that's still a much better investment, than investing in some random, token on Coinbase, for example. And so those are the things that I take notice of.
One of the things we're looking at commercial real estate is how to include blockchain technology, Web3. Do you think in the future that real estate deals, whether it's residential or commercial, are going to get done without title companies? People are going to have a verification of a deed. It's going to be able to transfer, exchange funds. Maybe it's through a digital currency like a Bitcoin, Ethereum, instead of cash. Do you think that's out there in the future? Like we're going to look, you and I are going to sit down again in 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, oh my God, look how far we've come.
Yes.
Is that where you see the future happening?
Very, 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 very much so. Very, very much so. I see, particularly as we see increased inflation and the fact that salaries aren't and really haven't ever, caught up to that rate, you're going to see increased fractional investment. I think that unfortunately for many, that's the only way that they're going to be able to afford a home. But also you've already seen this. I mean, there's already been hundreds of millions, if not low billions of dollars of kind of piloted, fractional real estate transactions, more on the commercial side. But it really, really does excite me because the transactions associated with escrow and the fact that, at least in the United States, a lot of, real estate, or real estates have titles, right? In a lot of countries, you don't have the foundation, the regulatory foundation to even have titles, like Tanzania, for example, or Nigeria or Kenya, right? There are huge plots of lands that are ancestrally passed down, and that is the title, right? There is no literal title. And so having that foundation allows particularly places like the United States to very quickly, get rid of what can add 10 to 15% on your transaction when making real estate investments. But it also enables, democratization of accessing deals that other people wouldn't otherwise be able to access. So like the funds that you were discussing to me that you have, like normal $10 folks being able to participate in typically $250,000 LP investments is a massive dynamic change. And it also allows those funds to raise billions of dollars instead of tens of millions of dollars. Now, granted, where we set the limit as to what an accredited investor is, I think does need to be set to the point at somebody educating themselves as to how to make a good investment. But what I do disagree with, and I think the SEC is getting a lot of pressure on right now, is that you can't just say you have to be a millionaire to be an accredited investor, or you have to make over $200,000, because how much you earn doesn't necessarily mean how educated you are. There are a lot of people in crypto that made millions of dollars and they don't know anything, right? They were just at the right time and right place.
Right place, right time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what's your vision for Umoja Labs, and where do you aspire to be in 10 years? Like let's look forward and tell me what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Our vision is to democratize access to two things: to low-cost transactions, and that can be in the context of humanitarian aid, that can be in the context of remittances, and then also democratizing access to credit, particularly across emerging markets, starting with Africa. So the continent, we're looking at Tanzania, Nigeria, Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya. And what that looks like is now in most emerging markets, unlike the United States, when you need to get a loan, for example, you could have to put 100% collateral, which at that point you don't need the loan anymore.
Right.
You might as well just not get the loan at all. And in addition to that, right, you have small businesses, right? They're literally in a state in which they cannot expand. They're not risky. I think there is a westernized thinking of, the further out the United States you get when it comes to business and investments, the riskier it is. That's not necessarily true. In fact, emerging market corporate bonds now provide more yield than U.S. Treasury bonds, and their risk, is about the same as corporate equities, right? And so that's pretty good. So they're becoming less risky investments. They're businesses that, they're multi-million-dollar revenue a year businesses. Some of them much smaller. And so having access to credit where they don't have to put an insane amount of collateral, or they're paying interest rates that, are so far high above what you would see in other countries, it's ridiculous. I think is going to greatly change the world. And it's also going to change the type of technologies we use. I think a lot of the technologies, the next mass adopted technologies, are going to come from emerging markets and not developed markets. And then in terms of, the cost of transacting, you're talking about, I think it's over over $500 billion in remittances are facilitated each year globally. And, 5 to 10% of that is taken by MoneyGram, Western Union. And this is literally economically, stifling a lot of countries that are dependent on those, like Haiti, for example, or other areas. And so, just creating a world in which people can access financial services in a globally competitive market rather than a locally locked market. For us, 10 years from now, in fact, we have 7 years from now, this is 2023, we have a goal by 2030 to facilitate $100 billion in lending. And that seems like some insane amount. That's because we're not going to institutions, it wouldn't be scalable if we were only going to institutions to access that capital. You can only facilitate that type of raise across emerging markets when you're leveraging peer-to-peer technology, because everyone is a potential LP and everyone's a potential borrower. And so that's our goal, and effectively to make a lot of these intermediary services hopefully useless. I don't want to use too aggressive words. They might be listening, but
it's all good. So a few years back, you worked at Consensus Blockchain Solutions in a role focused on social impact, which is interesting. And I believe your current company, Umoja Labs, has a social impact focus as well. Share more about how blockchains can drive social impact. You touched a little bit about with credit and everything. What else can that do?
Yeah, so there are a few use cases that we focused on: immutable evidence, self-sovereign identity, and payments. Those are the three focuses. And some may be wondering, okay, what the heck is that? So, for example, immutable evidence. There were two use cases that we did it. In one, domestically, and we did this in Oakland actually, there's sexual assault forensic kits. Now, most people don't know that when someone is sexually assaulted, oftentimes that crime isn't taken very seriously, unfortunately. They will do a very traumatizing process of collecting evidence, of that sexual assault. That requires you to remove your clothes, everything, right? And it has to be very directly after the event occurred, which is not a time where you want to be vulnerable. And what has been found, and some of the biggest cases are in Detroit, but other cases in Oakland, is that unfortunately some law enforcement, offices will put that in a warehouse, that evidence in a warehouse, and it will just stay there. There's no transparency as to whether it's been checked against the sexual assault, national database or not. Whether it's been messed with, right?
Yeah, tampered with.
Exactly, tampered with. And so this makes the entire process of finding justice in an incredibly vulnerable situation incredibly opaque. So applying, blockchain technology to it, you can say, okay, we'll take the data of this particular evidence, right? We will create a fingerprint of it, right? And we'll put it on a technology like blockchain to make sure that it literally cannot be messed with. So if we were to process that data again, say when it's time for court, and it shows a different fingerprint, that means we know it was tampered with. And so we did this both in the context of sexual assault forensic kits, but also in the context of digitally collected data for prosecuting international war crimes in Syria. So the second use case was there's a social enterprise actually backed by Mark Cuban called Hala Systems, and they collect digital data in and around different areas of Syria. And these things can be microphones, they can be human observers, they can be video cameras, and they're literally looking at multiple aspects of a potential war crime happening. For example, is there a jet flying down, or is there gunfire in an area where there shouldn't be, right? And then taking the different aspects of someone observing it, a microphone picking up the audio, a video camera seeing it, and then using machine learning to really assess, okay, this thing actually happened. That's incredibly important, especially because it's digital, so it's more easily tamperable, to have tamper-proof. Because the common defense when you go to international criminal court is this is a fraud. This is a political, death spiral. The United States is trying to, whoever's trying to do that, right? And so now you can go into international criminal court and say, no, this is provably has not been changed since we collected it on the ground. And so those are two examples that we worked at with Consensus. Obviously, we also facilitated the first crypto-based humanitarian aid program in Vanuatu. And so this was, to the earlier example, a situation where now commercial and institutional donors can give to NGOs, understand 100% to the cent of where their funds are. And some of the, I would say, most under-resourced areas in the world. I mean, Vanuatu is the most disaster-prone island on Earth. It has volcanoes, it has earthquakes, it has cyclones. The central bank recently, a few years ago, literally, their innovation was to just create plastic money, create money that was less, it could last longer, right? Rather than, go the digital route because of the lack of resources in this particular area. And even in areas like that, you can drive transparency. So those are kind of two different examples in terms of impact.
Everyone, he keeps saying the word NGO. I can define it, but I want you to define it. You're the expert. Explain to our audience and everyone, what does NGO mean? Because that way they understand the context behind it.
Yes, absolutely. So NGO stands for non-governmental organization. It's typically synonymous with nonprofit. So when I say NGO, I'm meaning, multinational organizations like Oxfam, Red Cross, USAID. Those would be examples of NGOs.
So you have a place in Tanzania. What inspired you to move there? I wanted to ask you this. And how do you like living there? And what's the lifestyle like? I mean, what's the difference between there and the United States? Explain to everyone like how this came about, and then obviously what if someone visited Tanzania, like what's the difference? How does it look?
Yeah. Well, for any Swahili speakers in Karibu, right? Welcome to Tanzania. It's amazing. Like I'll first attend to how I got there, and then kind of how it's like in compared to the United States. So how I got there. So we have three co-founders of Umoja: myself, John Lewis, both of us African American. Our third founder, Sandra Hart, she's Rwandan. Okay. And so we already had both an ancestral, given that we've all shared the African American experience, but then also the cultural, and Sandra related to the continent. Okay. And then also John and I's work while at Consensus was only done across emerging markets. So that exposure from a career perspective and a technology deployment perspective was very much related, particularly to East Africa. And so when we were looking at, okay, where can this technology be most useful based off of our experience and where we've been, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya were front line. And the reason being is because these are some of the most mobile native countries on the planet, right? They have what's called mobile money. So imagine, for those who haven't heard that term, imagine Verizon and Chase merged. So now your phone, provider, your network provider is also your bank account.
Okay.
And so you can access your bank account by texting, right?
Wow.
That is what mobile money is.
Okay.
And so for a lot of individuals who don't have smartphones, don't have apps, and they just have a Nokia, mobile money is essential, right? Because you need a text-based interface to access your money, to send money, etc. And so this is something that's existed for decades now across East Africa, and it's allowed a culture of peer-to-peer, financial, just a peer-to-peer financial culture. And when you have that, blockchain technology is actually not so foreign now. Like peer-to-peer lending, oh yeah, that makes sense. We've been doing this with, transactions for a while now.
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons in particular. But Tanzania, very specifically, because on top of that, they're a very agriculturally dependent nation. And so things like peer-to-peer lending are going to greatly enable smallholder farmers or other entities that don't have access to financing access where commercial banks aren't giving any access whatsoever. Okay. And so it was this trifecta of this cultural affinity, this mobile money driven culture, and also the gaps that exist in certain sectors when it comes to financing and just peer-to-peer transactions more generally, that made Tanzania the best spot.
How far is that from the equator? It's got to be so hot there, isn't it?
It's
got to be close.
It's I think it's maybe a few hundred miles, maybe 1,000 miles. It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, going to your second question,
yeah,
it is amazing.
Okay.
It's very much like California, especially on the coast. It obviously, cheaper, so multiple pay scales lower than the United States, which does help, obviously. Right. But people are very nice. Tanzanians are typically more calm. There's a joke. They're kind of the opposite of Nigerians. Right. Nigerians, go-getters, hustlers, a bit more confrontational. Tanzanians, opposite, very calm, but, soft-spoken, more introverted. Both are great, obviously. And yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful. I mean, they have beautiful beaches. It's just a great place to live. I wish more people had access to go, especially to the eastern and western coast of Africa, because if they saw it, it would be much closer to paradise than it is to what is commercialized or what's marketed as to what Africa is. Yeah, it really is amazing. Food is great. Like, yeah, it's a great place.
So the name of my show, as you can see, is I Own It. Yeah. It's owning every aspect of your life, your behavior, your relationships, your everything.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any recent examples where you can go back and look at, like, I didn't own it fully?
Yeah.
Like, and can share with everyone? What would be an example?
There's so many, man. Unfortunately, there's a lot. I would say earlier in my career at Consensus would be an example. So alluding to what we were talking about earlier. As an entrepreneur, as you well know, right, based off of your passions and your market focus, you really kind of determine how much fundraising you can do, right? There are sexier areas that are more thematic based off of the times, and then there are not as sexy areas, right, where they're more reliable, more sustainable, but going to take a lot longer in terms of raising money and trying to accomplish what you're trying to do at scale and have a global impact. And so in a space like, Web3, right, impact, and I would say that this is still true today, is not one of the sexy areas. It's becoming more sexy now because there's a lot of lobbying, and you have to prove to regulators that there is an actual use case beyond just trading on Coinbase, for example. And Coinbase is doing a lot of great work, to show those use cases. And when I was at Consensus, I don't think I owned accepting that and really leaning into it, right? You try to create this, because you have to create a narrative to investors, to people who are willing to, follow your path, right, as to why they should. And if you have one foot in the camp of, we can do these sexy things that really aren't natively a part of what you're doing, and then also we're doing this stuff in impact, then less people are going to follow you because you have a very confused narrative, right? And that's both, again, with audience, with users, and also investors. And early at Consensus, I think, we didn't do a great job of that as much. And it took me a few years really to learn that if you're going to do something, F what people say in terms of it being sexy and things like that. If you're passionate about that thing and you're putting 110%, you're going to make that thing happen, right? It may take more persistence, but it does not help you to be envious of other markets, that may get money because they created a white paper, don't even have any product, right? That doesn't help you, right? That's lost energy. Yeah.
Well, it's a great point that you get rewarded for focus in life. You always will get rewarded for focus. That's how you create success and wildly to become successful, as I have in my career. One thing you talked about is thoughts. When people are, the outside world are pouring thoughts into your head that Web3, it's not going to make it, this is a scam. It's that fear-based, the scarcity base, I call it. And when you can manage that and say, you know what, they just don't know, they're not as educated. Because that's what it is. I don't understand blockchain. I don't understand crypto. It's foreign to me. Never understood it. It doesn't make sense. It's not tangible. That's where the fear comes in. So it's well said. They're so true, is that don't worry about, people say the haters out there. But it's true. If you're an expert in what you're doing and you're committed and focused, that's where you focus your energy, and that's where you'll create success. What's the best way for our audience to engage with you and follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter at RobTG4, so ROBTG4. You can also follow Umoja, so it's just Umoja Labs on Twitter, and Umoja Protocols, where we're doing all of our financing stuff. I'm quick to respond. I love collaborating, and if you leave from anything, you cannot create a application or a business on blockchain technology and not be collaborative. It is peer-to-peer driven. So if there's anyone that's working on things that are similar, I would love to partner with them.
Okay, great. Is Umoja Labs hiring these days?
We are hiring both on and off continent. Looking for engineers, designers, but also people who are not necessarily from the Web3 space. So if you have a traditional finance background, you are incredibly useful in the space because you understand what works and what people are attached to, and you can take that and transform it and make it more efficient rather than starting the other way.
Got it.
So yeah.
Excellent. So we're going to wrap up with our three questions. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. How old are you these days?
I just turned 30 last week.
Okay. So you're a young man still. So in the studio, generally speaking, we have a couch here. And I would say, all right, Robby, lay on the couch, close your eyes. You're 30 years old, accomplished, a lot of experiences in a young age. Go back to when you were 16. Now that you know right now what you know and your experience, what would you share with your 16-year-old self to help guide through all the chaos and the ups and downs in life to really help you propel to where you'd want to be in life?
It's a great question. I have to simmer my emotions as I think about this because we all know that we were a lot more vulnerable at 16. Absolutely. Just be confident and believe in yourself. I think especially for teenagers now, you see depression rates as high as they've ever been. Believe in yourself. Literally, F everything that everybody says to the point you said. Believe in your own convictions. And I would say for those who are that age now, who may be listening or not, do affirmations. Tell yourself you're the shit every day.
Yeah.
It feels
Such
weird.
Great advice.
It feels weird, and it will be weird when you do it.
Yeah.
But if you do that every day, because no one else is going to do that for you.
That's right.
If you do that, you're going to approach life and risk in a much different way. To your point, if you do it scared. That's I would tell myself that because I struggled a lot with that, and I really don't think I established any semblance of real confidence until maybe 25. It took a long time.
Robby, what a great answer. It's confidence is everything. So it's our last day on earth, God forbid. It's just me and you.
Yeah.
It's our last meal together.
Yeah.
Your choice.
Yeah.
What are we eating and what are we drinking?
Okay. This is going to be a mixture of things. So for the food, you're going to have to do some fufu and curry. Fufu is this doughy substance that you dip in things. It's usually paired. There's different names for it across different countries, but it's really good. Dip in the curry.
Okay.
Probably a side of mussels.
Ooh.
And And then I would say to drink. I'm more of a fruity drink guy, unfortunately. I'm thinking like keep it simple, like a pina colada or like a very sweet wine that may be too sweet for your taste.
I collect wine. I'm more of a Bordeaux cab guy, but I could rock anything.
Okay.
I love the pina colada, and I like the meal that will go with it. So I'm all.
Yeah, some spices and sweet.
When it's my last day of it, I'm definitely calling you. Hopefully we're together.
Yeah.
So in a studio, you could see at our I Own It studios, we have a grand piano, drum sets, and electric and acoustic guitars behind me.
Yeah.
So if we could have any musician or band walk through that door and play us a song. Now think about this. They could be living or deceased. Okay. Who would you have come through the door, and what song would they play us, Robby?
I'm gonna what's your name? The Family Stone. Sly and the Family Stone.
Ooh, I love Sly.
If you want me to stay.
Yeah. What song are we playing?
If you want me to stay.
If you want me to stay, that's a great song.
Yeah. That's like one of mine.
I love Sly and the Family Stone. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. That's the one I'm singing in the car while people are looking at me awkwardly.
Oh, that's cool. Love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for coming in studio. Such a delight.
Thank you.
What you teach and preach is what a lot of folks are wanting to learn about. So keep sharing the knowledge and all your great content, and just really enjoyed our visit here today. And I'm really grateful you came in. So thank you.
No, thank you. You're a wealth of information, and obviously what you're doing, I really do think is accelerating people's ability to realize their true selves. And you don't have to do it, but you still do. And, certainly appreciative of that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. If you want to listen to more episodes like this with Robby Greenfield on the I Own It show, kick that subscribe button and subscribe today. You'll be glad you did. Feel free to click the like button so we can share this type of content all over the world. And like I say, let it go viral. To follow me and learn more about Ben Reinberg, go to benreinberg.com. You can follow me on all different social media platforms. If you're interested in investing in commercial real estate on a passive basis, feel free to go to my company's website, alliancecgc.com, and feel free to log on. You can check out all our testimonials, and feel free to lock in on our new investment fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund. We are the leaders in investing in medical office throughout the United States. Robby Greenfield, thank you so much for joining us. Such a pleasure, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.